Hey, what's up, everybody, YouTubers? This is Truth Survives 411, checking in with you again. Just wanted to mention something kind of early on in this process for me that I just feel is very important that I share with you. Those that, again, are ex-JWs, those that are thinking JWs, fading JWs, doubting JWs, as I've said before. I knew of a young man, let's just say he had a YouTube channel during a big part of 2013, 2014. He woke up to the organization as I did. I knew him since he was a very young individual, probably just near 10 years old, up until this year. And he had a name on YouTube called Be True, Be Real. That was his moniker. And I knew him as Jonathan. Some of you may be aware, but I just wanted to share that we did lose Jonathan this year, right around the third week of May, to suicide. And this is, in my view, just another example, another reason why I know that I made the right decision by leaving the Jehovah's Witness religion. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, jw.org, God's organization, whatever you want to call it. Long story short, Jonathan grew up in the Midwestern part of the United States. And this was an individual who grew up in a JW family, of course, like many of us did. He, of course, born into it, unlike myself. I kind of came along as a teenager. But Jonathan was, by all accounts, a stellar individual. A little bit of a shy, somewhat to himself individual growing up. But, of course, he, like several young people I'm sure that you know and I knew, he loved Jehovah, what he knew of him at the time. He wanted to do the right thing, wanted to please his parents. His mother and father were very active in the organization. He had a sister as well as a cousin, I believe, that spent part of her life with the family as well. Anyway, he grew up, of course, got out of high school, discouraged to pursue any type of education, of course. And of course, he pioneered, put himself into the ministry, and of course was accepted at Bethel. He served in Bethel in mid-2000s, and right around that time, 2005, I want to say, that was one of my several visits that I took with my ex-wife and my son to visit. And Jonathan was one of the individuals that actually gave us a tour at the factory. Again, just a stellar guy as far as JWs go. Was not a jerk on any level, and really has some deep things about him, but it just wouldn't really come above the surface in the context of the organization, I imagine, for that being probably the biggest reason. But anyway, I lost contact with him again because he had went to Bethel. I moved away from the side of town that I knew him from and was serving elsewhere. And of course, just had heard, talk in passing with his father, who I knew rather well as his mother. And basically, no news is good news as it relates to Jonathan and how he was serving at Bethel at the time. But anyway, once I exited the organization, or was pretty sure that I was going to exit the organization, and I had been in a period of reflection and research, YouTube being one of my tools for research, guess who I found online? Yeah, a picture, a cover picture in the video that looked very familiar to me, albeit a much older individual than when I last saw him. And of course, that was Be True, Be Real. And that was Jonathan. And this brother, let me tell you, if he didn't lay out so many wonderful, lucid, and solid comments and observations and questions about this organization and why they're as wrong as two left shoes when it comes to a lot of the crap that they put on people, it was it was just stellar. And I was very intrigued and very moved by a lot of his comments and points. And of course, unfortunately, after his death, for some reason, I'm not sure exactly what the circumstances were, but all of his content was immediately pulled off of YouTube. Not sure if that was his family or if, Google does something when they get death notices. I don't know. But talk about losing a lot of wonderful content. That would be the case with this individual. Be true, be real. He was 30 years old when he decided, based on everything he was going through, marriage that didn't go well. He was estranged from his wife at the time. Parents totally shunning him because he disassociated from the organization, which came about because, as he tells it, comments from family members to the elders at the time, and his subsequent essentially being banished from his family, both parents, and of course his relatives that were JWs, and being in a part of the country that didn't have a lot of support systems in place for him, made life very difficult. But once I found him on YouTube, I reached out to him last summer. This would have been late June of 2013. And I told him I was on my way to a family vacation in Atlanta. And on my way there, I would stop and meet him in Kentucky, where he was at the time, him along with my son. And I would love to see him, have a conversation with him, and let him know that, yes, I've woken up to my brother. But anyway, we had some good conversations when we did meet in person. He told me quite a bit in terms of what brought him to this point. And of course, some of the things he was saying echoed in my own mind, as I'm sure it has been the case with you. And this young brother was a thinker. And as we know in this organization, Jehovah's Witnesses, Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, they have no use for people that think. No use whatsoever. So that, of course, led to him exiting based on his conscience and how he felt about things. But anyway, things got apparently so difficult for him over the course of the next 8 to 9 months. He left Kentucky, came up apparently to the Peoria area within Illinois, and I had not heard from him probably in about 6 to 8 weeks after leaving a couple messages. So I was just wondering, how he was doing. But something told me, something moved me to say, just do a Google search of his name and suicide. I don't know why that came to me to do that search, but it did right around mid-June of this year. And little did I know that Google would return results to me that shows that this young brother's choice in dealing with a terribly painful situation that in part was the doing of his parents, albeit they're misguided. You could make that case. But his parents shunning him, cutting him off, not offering the needed support that he rightly deserves, despite his questioning his religion. And other individuals that knew of his plight, not reaching out in support, that was very close to him, including his estranged wife. His choice was to jump off of a bridge in broad daylight, right around the third week of May before the Memorial Day holiday. Witnesses saw it, people, not JWs, but people saw him do it. And at the time, apparently, he was living at a mission in this area of the country. Can you imagine? My initial reaction was just shock, disbelief, and utter sadness. But as you can imagine, just shortly after that, it turned into anger and resentment and me wanting to essentially point the finger at this organization and say, yes, blood guilty. Blood guilty, blood guilty, blood guilty. Any organization that can claim to have the blessing and spirit of God, and yet by virtue of its own practices, its own beliefs, causes individuals that leave said organization to take their own lives because they have lost a sense of their humanity. And of course, people are contributing to that by shunning them, considering them no longer worth paying attention to, treating them as if they are dead. That can't be an organization that has God's backing. That frankly tells me all I needed to know about the organization. And yet I had heard of such stories before, to be quite frank with you, but you never looked at them through the lens of an experience like this, and also being on the other side of the organization yourself. But it was just terrible, terrible. And I immediately got into a campaign, if you will, of calling several existing current JWs, including my ex, and letting her know, my mother, letting individuals I know that are currently serving as elders, that I know what happened to Jonathan. And despite what people may try to say or paint it as the contributing reason for his suicide, you can't pull the okie doke here. I know the situation reasonably well. And while I may not have every single detail that maybe certain individuals close to him may have had, like his parents, I doubt that they can recuse themselves completely from what happened here. And don't get me wrong, I have a tremendous amount of sympathy and empathy for his parents, because again, I know both of them very well, and they actually spoke at my wedding reception. So that's how well I know the family. And while I do mourn with them, they have to go to bed every day knowing that their treatment of their son up until he took his life was inhumane, unjust, and uncalled for. And they have to ask themselves the question, if they had not chosen to blindly follow this religious precept that says you're no longer worth anything if you are not a Jehovah's Witness, then what might have been, what could have been with Jonathan's life from that point forward? Even though they may have been estranged religiously going forward, what might his life have turned out to be? That's the sad tragedy of it all. But I couldn't rightly start this opportunity to express and introduce myself to the ex-JW community, the YouTube community, without saying to you that, yes, I was deeply affected and touched by this religion in more ways than one, and this was one of the latest that touched me in a way that I'll just frankly never forget. And I will never forget, because this young brother, like I said, had a mind. And he had a mind that he was ready to use, and use for good. He was very good with his music, played the guitar, and he took his mind to places where he felt there was freedom. And who am I? Who are we? Who is anybody to judge him for questioning things that he had been fed since birth? So to Jonathan, be true, be real. I miss you. And I'm sure that there are others that miss you as well, and certainly love you. And regardless of what I know about what happened after the fact, in terms of where you are now, I know that it's a good place and it's a right place for you. Blessings.